Hello everybody, good morning and welcome to the United Stand. This is your latest Manchester United news, as Manchester United basically put out a very big hint that the money is gone, that they are broke, and that the Glazers, for the first time I think in, is it 6 years or 17 years? I don't know, because they've been doing it for so often. But the Glazers, I did write it down, first time in seven years I think it is. Or, put it this way, over the last 7 years, the Glazers have taken £155 million in dividends to pay themselves. They will not be allowed to take dividends in January. This is significant news for Manchester United and Manchester United fans. What does this mean for the January transfer window? What does this mean for the sale of the club? What does this mean for the position of the club? Really interesting news that came out last night from various outlets. But if I just read you what the BBC said on this, this is from Simon Stone. Manchester United have opted not to pay a semi-annual dividend to shareholders in the 2023 financial year in response to the increased investment in Erik ten Hag's playing squad. The controversial dividends have been paid since 2015, so 7 years, and in the last financial year, 33.6 million was paid in dividends, mainly to the Glazer family. The news containing United's first financial quarter results comes out just over a fortnight after the American family confirmed that they are considering selling the club they've owned since 2005. So it's done under the guise of Manchester United, not wanting to pay dividends because they spent so much on players in the summer, which would be quite responsible. I mean, I read the Manchester United Supporters Trust statement that they put out last night. We'll talk more about that in a minute, because I think unfortunately it's led to division in the fan base, which I just despair at that, really. But that's a different issue. But basically, a long statement from the Manchester United Supporters Trust, of which in it said that they've been on about dividends being stopped paid to the Glazers for many years, because failure shouldn't be rewarded with payments to the owners, which is fine. But my personal interpretation of this, and I think, look, you can get lost in everything. If I said to you that United are paying, a couple of £1 million a week in interest payments, I mean, that's ridiculous. If I said to you that the debt is going up, it's the same, it's about $650 million, but obviously with the pound weaker against the dollar, and we are a UK-based club, then that is actually, it is going up, and it's hundreds of millions of pounds, as we know. It's increasing. We've also got the cash balance in the club, which is normally about 100 million, is down to 22 million pounds. So that's the cash balance within the bank. There is a hidden positive in there, that the revenue in the first quarter has gone up to £143 million, and that's up by 13.6%, so about 20 million quid. But why has the revenue gone up? Because we've just saved Ronaldo's wage. And also revenue is not profit. And I don't want to get lost in the detail of financial, but basically Man United have made about 143 million quid in the first quarter of their financial year. But that's not 143 million pound profit. As we know, well over half of that goes on wages. Not forgetting interest repayments, etc., etc., etc. So they're not in a good position. The Manchester Evening News has also reported from sources that the decision not to give dividends to the Glazers for the first time in 7 years reflects the investment in the club in the summer. The BBC have mentioned that as well. I've got a couple of things I would say on this, and like the sale of the club, I'm not party to absolute detail, because that just would never happen. But my interpretation is this: the Glazers would have took another, 15-20 million in January. Do you think they really? I mean, it's a hollow positive if they are trying to. I mean, there's two things for me. They're either not taking the dividends and they want to, but they can't because there's not enough money in the club. Or they're not taking the dividends because they're sort of going, look, we're not taking dividends because we're spent on the club in the summer. But, I mean, what's 20 million for 5.5 billion of profit? And that's the bottom line here. If you were the owners of United and you normally take 20 million every January and every June, would you really bother taking it in January when you know you're going to get 5.5 billion in May, like from selling the club? So, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think the money's there for them to take it. But I also think they know they're going to get billions and billions and billions in the next few months. So what's 20 million? So that's my opinion on it as it stands. How it's going to impact the sale, how it's going to impact January transfers, I think is going to be really interesting. Thank you for taking your time out, your personal time, to give us news about United, says Clips. Thank you very much for your super chat there. Madrid just threw 60 million at a random Brazilian 16-year-old. We should open up at United to save our club. And remember dropping the FC from the badge and becoming a PLC. Reap what you sow, says David Harper. 20 million to spend. Let's go for Mbappe. And United with the career mode bank account, says Big Mayo. So look, I think that to me this reluctance or refusal, or whatever you want to call it, to not take dividends out of the club in January, I don't think it's a good thing. And I think the sad thing is that I think a lot of people are just jumping on different conclusions. Some people are seeing it as a positive, that that means there's more money to spend in January. Some people are seeing it as a negative because it means we're in big trouble if the Glazers can't take money out of the club. Some people are indifferent to it, saying, well, why would you take dividends out when you're just about to take billions out? And some people see it as a victory for, various fan groups that have been protesting or challenging the Glazers for years and years and years. And the honest answer is I don't think any of those angles are completely correct. I think the club is in massive trouble. The debt is huge. We overspent in the summer, let's be honest. We bought some good players, but we overspent. Anthony straight away was 30 million over. And there were others as well. So we overspent in the summer. I don't think for what we spent in the summer, we've got anywhere near a team to win a title. And I think we need to spend again. I think the club isn't on its knees. I think it's on its chest. I think it's absolutely, if I was likening Manchester United Football Club, the corporate part of it, as somebody who's coming into A&E, I don't think they're coming in with a broken arm or a or a cut on their chin. I think they're coming in with with no pulse. I think the club is flatlining. I do. I genuinely do think the club is flatlining. I think it's in a fucking mess. It is saddled with hundreds of millions of pounds of debt, and it needs to spend hundreds of millions of pounds on it. And that's something you don't want. You do not want. If you're buying a car or you're buying a house, you don't buy something that's it's very expensive and also needs loads of money on spending on it. It's just the club is flatlining, pure and simple to me. Sale in the spring looking very likely, says Ginger Fury. Yes, and the positive for me is that the sale of the club has to happen, and has to happen quick, because the club is flatlining. The Glazers can't take dividends out. They're not allowed to. Basically, it's not been voted for on the directors' board. They know they can't take that. They don't want to take dividends out anyway, by the way, because if they take dividends out in January, it fucks up their balance that they're trying to sell. They want that bank balance to look as good as it can, and 20 more million pounds on the bank balance makes it look better to sale. I mean, this is not a victory against the Glazers. This is not some crusade that the fans have brought about. Not at all. This is a manipulative owner who is trying to sell this football club, who is saying, keep that money in the... I mean, it's just very obvious, isn't it? If you are selling a football club and you normally take 20 million quid out, but taking that 20 million pounds out ruins your bank balance to prospective buyers, keep it in, because 20 million isn't 5 billion. They're not taking it out because they're trying to make the club look better over the last 12 months, 6 months, whatever you want to call it. That's what this is all about. I don't see a victory here at all. I think the victory is Manchester United selling. And as Jeremy says, Ralph Rangnick said this back in April, didn't he? Open heart surgery, as Rangnick said. Look, the club needs a new stadium. It needs hundreds of millions of pounds spending on the structure, not the stadium. The structure of the football club. It needs hundreds of millions of pounds spending on the team, and it needs to lose hundreds of millions of pounds getting rid of players that are on stupid wages that aren't good enough. The current it's a good job we're up for sale, because if we weren't up for sale, I'd worry about us being the next Leeds United. And if you're old enough to remember what happened to Leeds basically went bankrupt, and I think that United and bankruptcy probably is unlikely, but United and huge financial problems is likely. And I think that's where we are. What would happen next? Let's imagine if the Glazers didn't sell United. What would next summer be? What would the summer after that be? What would happen to the stadium? It's just decay, rust, rot. There's no way back. The Glazers can't run this football club anymore, which is why I was saying in the summer, I think the sale of the club is coming very soon, and it's got nothing to do with Sir Jim Radcliffe rumours. It's got nothing to do with the Super League. It's got nothing... Well, it has got something to do with Super League, but what I mean is They're not selling because of protest. They're not selling because people are saying don't take dividends. They're selling because they've basically bled the club dry. They're at the point now where they can't take dividends. So what's the point? The sole purpose of owning United for the Glazers has become redundant. Their whole purpose was buying us on debt and taking money out. Now the club's still in debt, but they can't take money out. It's almost like you'd run United because you care about it, but they don't. They can't take the dividends anymore, so they've got to sell because otherwise they've got to spend their own money, which they just do not want to do. So I think it's positive in relation to the sale because I think it's more ammunition that they're going to sell 100% when they can't take the money out. What's the point in running United? So that's why they're going to sell. What it means for the January transfer window could be a bad thing. I'll talk about that in a minute. It could be a bad thing, but I just want to recap because I realised I didn't say at the start that we're live a little bit early today because I've got a few things on, so we needed to start a little bit early. But there was some big news coming out last night from Manchester United that the Glazers will not take dividends in January. Remember, they've done this for the last 7 years. Over £150 million taken over the last 7 years by the Glazers. They'll take nothing in January. They're saying this is because of the investment in the squad in the summer. Bullshit. This is to do with trying to sell the club. This is to do with no money being left, really. United are broke. I mean, we've been broke for a long time. We're not a thriving football club by any means. You're broke. We're technically broke. That's where we are at the moment. Whether you want to say that's financially broke or broke as a football club, we're straddled with debt. The stadium is, in major need of investment, as is the team. Got owners who like to take money out rather than put money in. They don't put money in. I mean, look, to any prat who wants to stick their nose in about Manchester United and say, oh, they might take money out, but they've spent billions. They've never spent a penny of their own money. This is Manchester United. The billion that we've spent in the last 10 years is Manchester United money. It's your money. It's generated by you. It's generated by sponsors wanting to see you, wanting you to buy their products. It's generated by Manchester United. It's not the Glazer money. The Glazers have never put any money into this football club. It pisses me off when people say, well, they might take 25 million out a year in dividends, but they spent 200 million in the summer. No, they didn't. Manchester United, you spent 200 million pounds in the summer. They're spending your money. They've never put their own money in. They take money out. They don't put their own money in. They never have put any of their own money in. So look, that's very important to remember. And that's where we are this morning. They're no longer able to take money out of the football club because they know that it will jeopardise their sale, and they also know when the sale goes through, they're going to make a lot more than 20 million. In fact, they're going to make a lot. If they've taken 155 million in the last 7 years, they're about to make 5 billion in the next 7 months. It pales into significance. It really, really does. They are clever businessmen, Tank. I mean, I hate to say it, but they are. They are. I've always said as a business model, it's a shame it happened to Manchester United because they've absolutely played a blinder in a business sense. They bought us on debt, they've bled us dry, and they're going to make billions of profits. As a business deal, it's absolutely magnificent. Unfortunately, it's our football club that's been destroyed because of it, and that's the heartbreaking thing, isn't it? So massive debt, as I said. Cash balance was something I wanted to talk about as well. We normally have a cash balance of about £100 million in the club, so it's a bit like your bank account, really. I mean, cash. People will go, well, £100 million isn't very much. I mean, look, this is a major business, and just like you've got a bank account, your wealth isn't the £1,000 you've got in your bank account or whatever you've got in your bank account. But Man United normally have about £100 million cash reserves. That's down to 20 at the moment because of the summer, presumably. So look, we don't have a lot of money, but that's not how you buy a player anyway. You buy a player on many different ways, played over a number of years, etc. What would you say to Glazer face to face as Ginger Fury? I mean, I think that the one thing I've always wanted to say to the Glazers is that if you'd put me in charge as your CEO, I'd have made you a lot more money and made the club more successful. And I'd love to see their brain figure that one out. One of the things that's always pissed me off about the Glazers is, I don't want them as owners, is just the people they've picked to run the club. They could have made more money if they'd had competent people in charge. Just look at the £1 billion you wasted. United have been better off spending half of that, and you could have had the other half. which I wouldn't want you to have, but it's just a sign of how crap you've run this football club, because all you've really wanted is 25 million a year. That's all you want. You're not bothered about what money gets spent badly or who the manager is or anything like that. You could have made a lot more money if you'd run the club properly, and that's something I've always wanted to say to them, to be honest with you. Greg says we only have a maximum of 15 weeks left of the Glazers, 15 weeks up to the end of March. Well, it could take a lot longer than that, Greg. I think we'll have to just wait and see. But what difference will it make to the January transfer window? I also want to talk a little bit about the infighting within the fan base, which I just think is ridiculous. I mean, look, as Greg says, we may well be coming to a new time under a new ownership, which should be very exciting, because I mean it could go wrong, but you know, when something is new and it's not the old bad thing, you've got to get behind that and work with that. And I just see so much bloody posturing in the fan base by different groups about we're better than you, you're better than us. You know, I just think, is unity not what we're trying to do? And some people just seem to want to make the world burn because they're better than everybody else. I don't get that. I just don't get that. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Most importantly, what impact does this have on the January transfer window? Well, if the Glazers weren't looking to sell, I'd say this was catastrophic for the January transfer window, because by not taking dividends, what did we do in the summer? We didn't buy any players in the first 2 weeks of the transfer window. And then the first money to go out of Man United was dividends to the Glazers on June the 24th. And, you know, Twitter, United fan base was rife with, they're taking money out before they're buying players. That's the Glazer way. So I would normally read this as they're not taking dividends for the first time in 7 years, and they're just going to say there's no money. You know, we're not even taking dividends, so we're not buying players. So I think it's catastrophic for the January transfer window, because if they're saying, well, look, we can't afford to take dividends out because of the money we spent in the summer, we can't buy anyone in January, that's catastrophic. We're not going to buy anybody in January. I get that. But the flip side to that coin is they're not taking dividends because they don't want to mess the books up for the new sale. Maybe the people that they're buying from, look, this could happen. Maybe the people that's buying Man United have said to them, all right, we'll pay that price, but you're not taking dividends in January. Maybe that's already agreed. I don't know. But also, if they are selling the club and they're going to make billions in profit, do you want that club to be in the Champions League, or do you want it to be in the Europa League, because that makes the club more valuable? So we could still spend in January to make the club more attractive to a sale, to give us a better chance of being in the Champions League, etc. That could still happen. But conversely, it could also mean that the club will go, well, look, we couldn't even afford to pay dividends to the Glazers, so there's no money to buy anyone in January. It could go one of two ways. And I suppose we'll have to just wait and see. I don't think it's going to stop us being linked to Cody Gakpo for 50 million or João Felix for whatever. But in all honesty, it could well be pushing us towards a Memphis Depay on a free. It could, because Memphis Depay will be expensive on wages, but he won't be expensive on a 20, 40 million pound deal. So it could push us towards that, which I'll be very angry about, because we shouldn't be buying a player in January because they're free. We should be buying the most suitable player. You don't close the gap on better teams by buying the cheap option, basically. And I think that would be a concern for me. But I wouldn't say it's the final nail in the coffin of a January transfer window. I would if we weren't up for sale. If we didn't know we were up for sale and the Glazers were planning to be here for 10 years, I'd be like, that's it, we're not spending in January, because they're not even going to take dividends out. So we've got no chance. But I think it could be bad news for the January transfer window. But if you're looking to sell the club, then it might not make a massive amount of difference, to be honest with you. We don't need another high wage player at the end of these best years, says Tank. And Marching Bolivian says the club's not looking good right now. And do you think there can be any worse owners than the Glazers, says Blake? No. And I've spoken to a few people about this. And effectively, you can't be bought by the Glazers anymore. I know I've said this before, but for anybody who's not heard it, we can't have owners as bad as the Glazers in the way the Glazers have been bad. If you think about it, when the Glazers bought Man United, we were massively profitable. We were on an upward curve. Brands were queuing up for us. You know, titles were queuing up for us. Everything was coming to Man United like a magnet. And Sir Alex was like, ooh, that's not a machine gun, that's a magnet, pulling everything towards us. Brand deals, players, titles, trophies. Man United were at the top of the game, top of the tree, competing with people like Real Madrid. Like we were the biggest club in the world, and we were, delivering everywhere. And the Glazers got us on debt, and they continued to ride that for their first few years. The stadium was good. The brands were still queuing up. You buy the club on debt with none of your own money, and the value of the club keeps going up and up and up. And they bought us at the top. And since then, we've dropped and dropped and dropped. And the trophies have gone away, and the sponsors are going away. So you can't be bought by some opportunist mercenary business people anymore, because if you buy Man United now, one, you won't buy them on debt, and two, you're going to pay a massive price for it, and three, we're not winning things, and four, the money's not there, the brands aren't there. So if you buy Man United now, it's got to be a long-term project. Even if you want to buy United for 6 billion and sell them for 12 billion, well, to make us worth 12 billion, you're going to have to put a lot of work in over the next 2 decades. And in that time, to make us worth 12 billion, stadium, team, trophies have got to come back. So we can't be in that position. We can't, because we're not the club that the Glazers bought. The Glazers bought a very big cow full of cash. What's available now is a very skinny cow with no cash, and that doesn't make sense for another Glazer to come in and buy. There we go. There is a high chance they will support Ten Hag in the winter window for the top four, which makes their claim to sell United a bit more possible, says Khatib. And Krishna says, Mark, it is also a point that if we are going to be buying Gakpo, so we are paying 30 million more than what would not be there if we had bought him in the summer. So it is in the whole some bad negotiations, says Krishna. And Adrian says, do you think Arab owners would be good for United? I personally do not really think anybody should be sat telling the fan base that's a bad owner, we don't want this, we don't want that. Unless you are completely against Middle East oil money or oil money from anywhere else for whatever reason, I don't think any owner can be discounted at this point, because Sir Jim Radcliffe could buy the club as a Manchester-born Manchester United fan and then have no money, in which case we're going nowhere. An American investment fund could buy the club and over the next 20 years pump loads of money in with the plan of 20 years' time selling it for 12 billion. Well, is that a bad thing compared to what we are now? I can see good and bad. I mean, ultimately, if somebody comes in for the next 10 years, spends a lot of money on the club, spends a lot of money on the structure, spends a lot of money on the stadium, and then wants to sell it, I don't really want somebody doing that. But in 10 years' time, for the next 10 years, we'd be in a completely different state, wouldn't we? So I'm not opposed to anybody buying Man United, but I'm not supporting anybody supporting Man United, because I just don't know what their plans are, and I don't know what it is. And to be honest with you, what their passport said really doesn't bother me. I'm more about who they are and what they want to do, and we don't know that at the moment. Sean from Ireland says they did buy us at the top, but they stopped us getting bigger and were the reason why we started going downhill. 100%, Sean. 100%. Yeah, 100%. You're absolutely correct. There's nothing we can do about the Glazers, but we can certainly do something about what happens next. And look, covering all of this is the undoubted statement that we are for sale and we are going to be sold. The Glazers will not want to keep hold of United when they can't take dividends out of it. The money's gone. We're broke. You're not having any more money. So they know they're selling, and they know that's what's going to happen. My belief is on the sale, by the way, the reason it's gone very quiet is because probably we know who's buying the club, and the people who are buying the club are working in the background with Manchester United. And let me just say, this is only a theory, but I've been saying this for a while. I think United already know who they're selling to. I think it's going to be American investment, and maybe that American investment has said to the Glazers, you're not taking dividends in January. You're about to get a massive payout of billions and billions of pounds. You're not taking money in January. Because for me, the Glazers have taken dividends for the last 7 years. It doesn't wash that we're not taking dividends in January because of how much we spent in the summer. It's sort of like some fucking fake Robin Hood shit, isn't it? Oh, yeah, we normally bleed your club dry to about 20, 30 million pounds a year, but this year we're not doing it because we spent a little bit more in the summer transfer window. Oh, thank you. Thank you for thank you for giving us another 20 million in the transfer window instead of taking it out your own pocket. Why didn't you do it for the last 7 years then? Swivel on that. Swivel on it. I'm not interested in your bloody bitter positive spin. I don't believe it either. Do not believe that you're not taking dividends because we spent a bit more in the summer transfer window. Absolutely don't believe it. You've never done that before. Do not believe it. Actually think you're not allowed to take dividends out because the new owners don't want you to do it because you're going to get billions in a few months. Spin, 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 spin. Hypothetically speaking, would you swap Bruno for Jude, says Matt? Probably not. Probably not. Yeah, I probably wouldn't. Hail Europa says maybe the Rain Group are saying this as well. The people trying to sell the club. Probably, yeah. Look, for me, it's only speculation, but for me, I just do not think that the BBC have said it. Manchester Evening News have said it. I'm just going to check if anyone else has said it. There's a lot of people saying, oh, United, they're not taking the dividends out this time because of the money they spent in the summer. And I just don't believe it. I'm just not having it. I'm not believing it. I'm not having it. I don't think it's true. I personally think it's all to do with the sale. World Cup watch-alongs are back today, Tom Evans. Yes, they are. Yeah, I just do not believe it's true at all. Not having it. Also had a super chat. As much as I want Middle Eastern owners who can compete with others and run a successful club before the next generation, fans forget United. I fear these owners will face human rights issues and have to sell United again, says Leox. Thank you very much for the super chat. Well, if you've got any questions that you're confused about, let us know. That's what this show is all about, of course. But I also just want to say as well, and I think it's important to do this because I think we've got a fantastic community that welcomes people, and we have debates and everything, but it doesn't matter where you're from. Doesn't matter what your view is. That's what a proper community is all about. Yes, we'll have disagreements, but as long as it's respectful and well thought out, I think it brings different strands to the conversation. And I think we've got a fantastic community. What I don't think we've got a fantastic fan base. I mean, some of the arguments I've seen on social media this morning are just ridiculous. Manchester United Supporters Trust put their statement out. It's full of replies saying you've done nothing. This, other group is better than your group, and the 58's better than this. And, I'm just like, hold on a minute. What are you arguing about? Are people that thick that they think the Glazers not taking dividends is anything to do with the 58 or Manchester United Supporters Trust or the Red Army or United Stand or such and such website or Gary Neville? It's got nothing to do with any of us. So why are you arguing about it? Like, we're on the cusp of something that's really positive for this football club. The sale of Manchester United by the Glazers, a new start for this football club and fan base to come together and get behind something that could be a real rebuild that we've wanted for a long, long time. And yet you've got fans arguing about who's responsible for the Glazers not taking dividends. I'll give you a clue. None of you are responsible for the Glazers not taking dividends. Yeah, every fan has said for the last God knows how long the Glazers should not be taking dividends. 100%. But them not taking these dividends has got nothing to do with us. Nothing at all. They took dividends out in June before they even bought a player. We were protesting in the May. United fans were protesting in the May. And they still took dividends 2 months later. They do not care what we do as a fan base in relation to their dividends. It's got nothing to do with that. So arguing about who's the better fan group is a waste of time. Sorting your issues out and working together makes us stronger. Arguing about something that's got nothing to do with us just makes us weaker. One good thing about the Liverpool fan base is that when they come together, boom, like that, and this fan base needs to be better at it. People need to put aside their egos and, tension and think about what you're actually arguing for. You're arguing for Manchester United, not your own individualism. So why are people arguing this morning about, no, it's not because of you that they're not taking the dividends, it's because of them. No, it's not because of them, it's because of them. It's because of them. It's not, it's because we're better than you, you're better than us, and they're better than them. It's got nothing to do with fan groups or any individual fan as to why the Glazers have not took dividends this morning. And anybody who's arguing for that is wrong. I'm sorry, you are wrong. You may have campaigned for it, I agree with that. You may have marched for it, I agree with that. But that's not why they've not took dividends. They've not took dividends because they know they can't take them in January because they're about to sell the football club. And it's in their interests to keep that 20 million quid in the club to prospective owners buying the club. And 20 million, it's not worth taking 20 million when it could be the difference between 5 billion. And that's why they're not doing it. This is a tiny insignificance to the Glazers to not take £20 million in January, knowing that they've got billions coming in March and April. And that's all it is. It's got nothing to do with them going, well, you know what? The fans have been on us for ages not to take dividends out. Let's start doing that now. We're way down the road with that. If that was true, that would be an indicator that the Glazers are listening to the fans, which we don't want anyway. So we don't actually want any credit as the fan base for making them stop taking dividends, because that would be a scary indication that they're listening and going, we're going to try harder now. Nobody wants you to stay. Do what you're doing and piss off. So I wouldn't want any credit from this anyway, because it would be almost like the Glazers are going, oh, maybe we'll stay now. So the club going to administration, or like Derby did, because who can afford to buy the club and pay the debt? Says Nathan. We're not going into administration, Nathan. I'm absolutely telling you now, I know for a fact that people are queuing up to buy this football club. So we're not going to go into administration. The only way we would go into administration is if the Glazers can't find a buyer and refuse to sell for a price that's reasonable. Then they get lumbered with United. They can't do anything with it, and gradually we just get worse and worse off financially. But we'll never go into administration, because think about it like this: the Glazers want to sell the club for 6 billion. No one wants to pay 6 billion. They only want to pay 4 billion. If the Glazers sell us for 4 billion, they still make billions of profit. They only bought us. What did they buy us for? 3, 4, 500 million? They could sell us for $1 billion and still make profit. So we're not going into administration, because the Glazers will just sell us and take their profit. And they could sell us for 2 billion and make profit, 3 billion and still make a lot of profit. But they will end up selling us for billions because people will want us. So the scary thing is that the Glazers could sell us for 3 billion quid and still make fucking loads of money on us. So yeah, we're not going to go into administration. They will sell us, but they'll try and sell us for the biggest price. And if they can't sell us for the biggest price, they'll sell us for a price where they still make profit, which like Suckham says, they could sell us for a packet of crisps and still make profit. I mean, they virtually could. I know what you mean. Mark, I was at United game 10 years ago for the first time, and coming from Ireland and Croke Park GAA Stadium, I was shocked how bad it was 10 years ago, says Sean from Ireland. 20 years ago, I used to go a lot to watch United play in the early noughties. That was probably the period where I used to go the most. And you'd go there, and in the early noughties, you're talking 20 years ago, it was a good stadium. It was a good stadium, but it just shows you how things can quit. It shows you how things can deteriorate when you don't do something with them. And yeah, it's not that anymore. Should we be worried that if the new investors are American, the Glazers could potentially have a key to the back door, says FTSN? Well, you're sort of talking about stuff now that we just don't know. That there may be a backdoor route where the Glazers retain some sort of ownership of the club. That would be made public, and I think there would be a massive response to that. So I'm not going to say it's impossible that the Glazers could try and retain some part ownership of Manchester United. Welcome to the Members Club, Thomas. They could do, but it would be public knowledge as well. And one thing I would say is whoever buys Manchester United, there are more intelligent brains than mine when it comes to finance who will dig very, very deep to look into where the money is coming from and where it goes. So yeah, I think this will be a clean break from the Glazers. I mean, look, at the end of the day, if you buy something for 800 million and most of it is debt, and then you service the debt off the club's profits, and then you sell the club for 5 billion, you've just made 5 billion profit, haven't you? 4 billion if you decide to pay the debt off, which they won't. You just walk away. You've just made billions of pounds of profit in less than 20 years. I mean, look, I'm not used to those sort of deals, but how many business people buy something, get it to pay for itself, So you don't actually spend any money. You buy something on debt. You only ever pay interest payments back, which are paid for by the club's profits. And then you sell it for 5 billion quid in 17 years. You basically get something for nothing. And then 17 years later, you get 5 billion. I mean, it's the ultimate scam. It is the ultimate scam. And basically, why would the Glazers want to... They don't even like Manchester United. Why would they want to keep any part of us? You've just played off the best business scam ever. And it's not a scam because the Premier League allowed it and, you know, it never should have been allowed. But effectively, they bought us on debt, so they spent nothing. They used our profits to pay their interest rates on that debt. And then 17 years later, they sell it for 5 billion that goes into their pocket. They've spent... And also on top of that, during that time, they've paid themselves hundreds of millions of pounds in dividends. It's a scam. It's an absolute scam. And why would they not walk off laughing? Like, why would they not walk off with a big smile on their face? I sometimes think people don't understand that. It certainly doesn't get reported widely enough in the wider media because rival fans haven't got a bloody clue what happened. Somebody walked along, was allowed to buy Man United without their own money on a loan. They don't even pay the loan repayments. They pay themselves money from the club. So they're already hundreds of millions of pounds up on a deal that they didn't even make. And then they're going to sell it and take the profit of billions as well. Crazy. And this is what I mean. In relation to a business deal, unbelievable. You know, it's an amazing business deal. But unfortunately, we can't admire it because it happened against our football club, our institution, our thing that, you know, we love. Mark, after the sale, how much do you think owners will need for stadium, debt and other expenses before we compete aggressively in the market? Well, Leox, I think they've got to do all of that. I don't think they can leveraged credit, Mark, says Alex. It's how the rich stay rich. Yeah, and it shouldn't have been allowed in football. It shouldn't be allowed in football. I don't want to see a situation that happened at Arsenal where they build a stadium and then don't buy players because they're building a stadium. That basically happened at Arsenal under Wenger. They didn't really spend much on players because they were building a stadium, which was costing them a lot of money. It was done responsibly by Arsenal. They didn't have the money for players because they were building a stadium. And that was the lean years of Arsenal, if you can remember them. We don't want that. I know it's greedy, but we don't want that. We can't have new owners who come in and say, it's going to cost us hundreds of millions of pounds over the next 8 years to build Old Trafford up or build a new stadium, so we can't buy players. We've been in the wilderness for 10 years. We can't be in the wilderness for another 10 years because we're building a stadium. We need owners that are wealthy enough to come in and say, we're building the stadium and we're building the team at the same time. That has to be what happens. We might not get that, but that has to be it. And I think that's something to bear in mind when you're thinking about the owners and saying, I don't want that owner, I don't want those type of owners, I don't want this, I don't want that. Well, I'm sorry, I don't think a responsible owner can come in and go, there's £300 million for Ten Hag to spend, and there's £800 million to spend on the stadium. That's not going to happen under responsible ownership because our profit levels are about £200 million a year. So where's this 300 and 800 coming from? We need people who are going to just What you need to do with Man United from a business point of view is if you want to run it responsibly, we're not going to win anything for 15 years. It's going to be a long way back. We need someone to come in and go, I know it's going to cost me a billion or two in the first 5 years to build the team and the stadium, but in 10 years, I'll get that back because this club will be worth 12 billion instead of 6. That's how you do it. You buy the club for 6, you spend 2 billion on it, and then in 10 years it's worth 10 billion. We've just made 2 billion profit, or 12 billion. That's what I've always thought about this. And people might say you're being pie in the sky, but I don't think I am. I think the way football's going, I do think there'll be a Super League of some sort in the future that hopefully is agreeable to everybody. I do think football is just going to expand and expand and expand. I mean, we've just seen the Money World Cup, haven't we? You know, a World Cup in the winter, which we've never had in a country that's not really a football state. That's just super wealthy and has put loads of money into the game. There's a lot of money to come into football. That's the way it's going to go. Nobody can stop that. I actually think the best type of owner for United, if we want to win things, is buy the club for 6, spend 2 billion on it, turn it into Real Madrid, PSG, and then in 10 years, with a brand new stadium and an amazing team, that club that you've spent 6 billion to buy and 2 billion to build is now worth 10 billion, and you've made 2 billion profit. I think that's the way to go. Think big, go big, think big, become big. The Premier League need to take action and make it like Bundesliga clubs where fans have 50% sales stake in the club. It is a must. What are your thoughts? Says Nathan. If we're all going to play the same, we'd be the biggest club in the world anyway. With Real Madrid and Barcelona and Liverpool, Bayern Munich, and all the other big clubs. And some people don't like that. I'd rather live in a world where the Liverpools and Man Utd are the biggest clubs in the world because they've built that success over decades and decades, than the Newcastle and Man City model where it's just you've won the lottery. But that's just my personal view. Other people might go, well, why should you be big because of historic success? It's a new world. And that's not going to happen, Nathan, anyway, Ruan. I think, as much as I don't like it, the scenario I've just explained is the way that Man United becomes successful again. Please do smash a like on the video if you're watching, by the way. Marco says, welcome to capitalism, Mark. It's been happening to every public service in the UK since the 1990s. Look, you don't have to like it. Just need to know that that's the world we're living in. And Gaz Shaw says, we're finished, it's over. You know what, Gaz? My initial reaction is that it's not. But after a few seconds, you're right, it is. The football that I loved and grew up watching in the early 90s is over. The football that some of you who are older than me remember from the 70s and 80s is long gone. The reason I support Manchester United is because of my granddad, rest in peace. I absolutely worship the Busby Babes, Duncan Edwards. Now, football in the late 50s when he was watching it, and the 60s and the 70s was, without being stereotypical, it was a working man's game. It was, Saturday afternoon, packed into a stadium, couple of, not massively expensive, watching, people that people could relate to who weren't on massive money, playing the game everybody loved. The Premier League came along and revolutionised football. It became, I remember being taken to a match in the late 80s when I was very young. I loved it, but it was massively intimidating. It was 99% young men. And it was hooliganism, basically. That's what they called it. It was very, very different to what a game is now. And I think football now is amazing in the fact that it's so diverse. In the stadiums, you've got families and everybody going to watch it. But it's also become very corporate. It's not the working man's sport anymore. And it's not played by footballers that you can relate to, who you might see driving around your town. They're multi-millionaires. And the game is billionaires. It's money. That's what it is. And it's not recent. It started in 1992 with the Premier League and the Champions League. That's what it was. The rebadging of the game that we knew completely took the game away from what it was. It turned it into mega business. And as soon as something's making money, you don't get your local accountant running a football club anymore, or local man did good, owns Man United. You now get huge corporations that have got no touch point in Manchester at all. You get huge investment funds buying Chelsea, who probably don't even know what Chelsea is, but it's a brand in the Premier League. That's where we are. The fans are the same. Fans aren't turning their back on football. You're not turning your back on football, but the game is not the same. It's no longer our club. It's no longer our sport. It's owned by and run by people who are basically thinking, what streaming service can we get to show matches for billions of pounds? What brand can we get on our arse? Because we've got one here, let's get one on our lower back. That's what football is now, because it's got so many people watching it. So I do feel that when people start talking about, I want responsible ownership from somebody who's supported the club all their life and lives in the area, I mean, you're looking for the needle in the haystack, because that's not going to happen. Unless someone like Elon Musk is a lifelong United fan and knows everything about us and has the same principles as us and just happens to be a multi-billionaire, we're not going to get what we want. And therefore, you've got to think, well, all right then, I'm only here for a certain period of time. I want my club to win. what's the best way for Manchester United to win in this modern world that we can't deny is here. And ultimately, I've thought about it. I'm sure you've thought about it. Oh, I'd love a Sir Jim Radcliffe to own this football club, but I don't think he's got the money to run it the way it needs to be. So ultimately, I think we just need super rich owners to spend a lot of money on the club. And otherwise, we're going to be moaning about no trophies for the next 15 years as well. But that's only my opinion. Some people might have a different one. How did the government and the Premier League allow United to be bought and treated in the same way as a second home, says Glenn? I will always put my hands up and say, for me, I wasn't paying enough attention to what was going on with Manchester United when the Glazers got hold of the club. I knew it was a bad thing. And I know a lot of people were dead against it and did great work at the time but didn't stop it, and they knew this was going to happen and they were right. And I'll always champion those people because they were the people who tried to stop it. But one thing I don't know, and I don't know why the Premier League, football, or anybody else allowed this to happen. Because it's not like we all woke up in 2015 and went, oh, they bought us on debt. They've never put a penny in themselves and they're taking money out. Like, that was always going to happen when they bought us back in the mid-noughties. They were always going to do this. They bought us on debt. They were always going to use the club to repay the debt. And they were always going to take money out of the club. So whoever allowed that to happen, it just has to come down to the fact that no one had done it before. And they just probably didn't have the rules in play to stop it. But yeah, we are the example. Phenomenal business, phenomenal business plan, LJ. I would acknowledge that. It's sickening, but I would acknowledge that. But nobody had the foresight to see what the Glazers were doing. And look, let's not forget Ed Woodward and Richard Arnold and the other guy, what's his name, Matt Judge. I believe they were all part of, the purchase. Ed Woodward certainly was. That's why the Glazers loved him so much. But look, it is where it is, and we are what we are, and we live in the world that we live in, and I think the future has to be one of major investment. If United get sold, would they be able to get out of this hole, says Jim? Yes. Look, you know what? The great thing about a sale is that instantly your situation can change massively. And I think it's a great question because I think there's people going, well, if the Glazers sell, they get out and the club's still in a mess. But United's fortunes can change like that. As I say, if the person who buys United gives the Glazers what they want, they do walk off into the sunset very rich with a massive smile on their face. It's galling, but they do. But if the sale is done correctly, the debt disappears with them. The debt goes. So whoever takes on United, they're no longer in debt. It's a football club that is cleared of debt. If I was buying United, I would say, well, there's your 6 billion, but $1 billion of that you can pay off the fucking debt. So you can take 5 billion profit, but $1 billion of it, you're taking the debt. I ain't paying 6 billion for this club and then taking on £1 billion of debt as well. So you take your 6 billion, you pay off the debt, you still got 5.5 billion anyway, piss off. And I get a football club that's no longer in debt. I've still got a decrepit, rusting stadium, and I've still got a squad that's half full of shit, but I don't have any debt anymore. So every bit of profit that club's making is profit. Now, what the new owner might do is they might go to a bank and say, we want to take on a loan for $1 billion. They might do that straight away, but we should not be saddled with the debt that the Glazers had. If we take on new debt, which I wouldn't be surprised if we did to build the stadium, then that debt is new debt. And what I mean by that is we're in debt of about £500 million at the moment. So if you inherit the club with £500 million of debt, that 500 million has been spent on nothing. It's just debt. That should go with the Glazers. You're back to balance. And then if you take on another £500 million of debt, the 500 million gets spent on the stadium. So we may well end up in debt in the future. A lot of businesses go into debt, but it will be new debt generated to, hopefully go into the team rather than help the Glazers to buy the club. That's just the way. That's just the way it will work. So I wouldn't be, again, we're getting dragged down here, but debt is not a bad thing. Most people watching this show, if you're in the UK, will have debt. If you've got a house and a mortgage, you're in debt. You can afford to pay your mortgage and it's your house, but it's debt. So there's nothing wrong with a business having debt. The problem with the Glazer debt was that that debt was so that they could buy the club and then take money out of the club. That's bad debt. Somebody who buys the club and takes out £500 million loan to build a stadium, that's not bad debt, because you'll pay that £500 million back over the next 20 years with increased revenue from the stadium, etc. What we don't want is someone to buy the club and then get us in debt to buy players in a stadium, because then we're in trouble. We need rich owners, 100%. And as Sean Walker says, the debt needs to be for the right reason. Was Sir Alex Ferguson involved in the takeover, says Jacob? I'm not going to go down that road. And look, I want to say on a positive note, two things. First of all, there's a massive queue of people wanting to buy the club, and some of them are ridiculously wealthy. And that would be positive. Second thing I would say, I don't think the Glazers not taking dividends means we won't buy in January. It might. Maybe we do end up with Memphis Depay free. But if I was selling the club, I wouldn't take dividends in January anyway, because it just looks bad. And I would buy a player like Cody Gakpo for £40 million because we need it, and it makes us more attractive to the seller. So my theory has always been that we'll buy in January, and I think that will still happen, because if you're looking to sell, you want to sell the club in the best state it can be. Therefore, you don't take money out and you actually buy a player. It looks better to anybody wanting to buy the club. It looks worse to anybody wanting to buy the club if you don't buy players and you take dividends out. So I still think we'll buy in January, to be honest with you. Yeah. And that's the focus. That's the positive I want to focus on, really, because I think there's so much that we should be talking on. You know, if once we know who the owners are, what they're going to do with the stadium, how much are they going to spend on the club? Are they going to boot players out who should have been booted out a long time ago? What they're going to do with the board? Are we going to get a new CEO? Are we going to restructure the recruitment and get a new director of football, sporting director, and go and recruit the best of the best? These are all the things I want to see at Manchester United. You know, I basically want the first few weeks and months of the new ownership to be, you know, there's so much going on, your feet can't touch the ground. We're doing this. I mean, I'm pretty sure Erik ten Hag would walk up to those owners and say, look, I've got a whole plan of what I want to do. Can you deliver it? So that's what I want to see happening. And I'm hoping that these last few weeks and months of the Glazers will just move on. And when that news came out last night about them not taking dividends, a part of me was like, I don't really care. They're selling the club. Get rid of them. I can't be bothered with the whole Glazer out and, you know, they've destroyed this football club, because we know that. I just want them to go. If the new owners rebuild or build a stadium, will they keep Old Trafford, or will they give the new guys a sponsor name? Well, Tina, these are all things that I go back to. You know, you've got the old school of thought, which is mine, which Old Trafford should remain Old Trafford. And then you've got other people going, yeah, but if we give it a name like, you know, the Apple Stadium, we could make £300 million a year. Or probably not that much, but you know what I mean? It's money for nothing. So, I mean, look, if United build a new stadium at Old Trafford, renovate it and turn it into an amazing stadium, and it's called the Apple Stadium, I'll still call it Old Trafford. What they're going to do, sue me. So I don't massively care, because when I take Seb or my daughter to Old Trafford, they're not going to call it the Apple Stadium, because they'll be walking and they won't make it for kickoff, because it's Old Trafford. It will always be Old Trafford. So if United want to make £100 million a year to get a sponsor of the stadium and help the club become better, crack on. I'm still calling it Old Trafford, and most United fans I know will call it Old Trafford. So, and most fans around the world will call it Old Trafford. It's like the Newcastle ground. Wasn't it called Sports Direct or something like that? I still called it St James's Park. So Anfield will always be Anfield. I don't even like Liverpool, but if they call that the Spotify Stadium, it will still be Anfield. So I don't matter. It doesn't matter to me. Trafford has a ring to it. It's Old Trafford. That's what it is. New Trafford, it's not, Jim. It's Old Trafford. Old Trafford, that's what it is. It always will be. But money's in the game, and I've played the game, and money's in the game, and it's here to stay, and you either embrace it or die. And what we need is somebody that loves the club, wants it to do well, and wants to spend money on it, and that's it. Anyway, look, thanks everyone for watching. Please smash a like on the video. We're only 2 likes away from 1,000 likes. If you are a member of the club, thank you very much. Like 12 days of Cantona, Trafford sauce, he says. Chav TV's laughing. Don't forget to check out the quiz that we uploaded a couple of days ago, exclusively for our members. I've got a video coming up on Donny on there as well over the weekend, so check that out. Exclusive extra content for the members who help us out. But of course, we've got all your normal stuff for free. 8 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock in the morning, and any breaking news. I say 8 o'clock at night tonight. It won't be 8 o'clock tonight because obviously we've got the World Cup back today. So 3 o'clock for Brazil, Croatia, and then 7 o'clock for Argentina, Netherlands. Both of those will be on That's Football. So tune in for those watch-alongs. Looking forward to those. I will be on, of course. And we've got a video going up at 2 o'clock today, which I think is the preview for Betis tomorrow, because there's another watch-along tomorrow at 5 o'clock. So we'll see what the day brings, and we'll probably have a 9 o'clock show tonight as well. Take care, everyone.